Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're going to be doing part 136 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we can take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. We've got a few amphibians, we've got birds and a couple mammals. So I think we better just get stuck into this one. So we're going to be starting off. This one was done by Leaf and Scott, another one of our mini exhibit mods. So we're coming on the end of those, don't worry. We're starting to really dent into them. So now we've got the Harlequin Poison Dart Frog. Let's have a look at these guys. Let's have a look at you because you're a cutie. Look at this little man. So this is the Harlequin Poison Frog, or just the Poison Dart Frog. The Harlequin Poison Dart Frog, Uphagia historia. So these guys were species of poison dart frog that are endemic to the Choco region of Western Colombia, and they're normally found on the ground along leaf litter, things like that, and fallen limbs, but have sometimes actually been referred to as Uphagia hysteria, were actually their own species. So this was originally more a few species lumped into that, but now they've been named as different species. So we've got a lot more frog species, which is cool. So the average Harlequin frog has a snout to vent length, which is from here to their cloaca, of about 32 millimeters, or about 1.3 inches, so not very big. And the background colors, you can see, it varies from light brown and there's usually vivid strop pattern on the dorsum. So this is the Harlequin Poison Dart Frog, Uphagia hysteria. Let's check if that's actually the right species. Yeah, there's the correct species. I was thinking that looks a little bit different in the videos, but there is a lot of variation within these frogs, so it doesn't surprise me one bit. This cute little guy. There's probably a lot of variation in here as we have a look. Let's see. Good you little friend. Anyway. So, yes, a right to dark brown, all sorts of different colours to them. In terms of Harlequin Poison Dart Frog, they live in the forest floor. The male will call from a low perch to advertise his kind of presence, and the females will lay their eggs among the leaf litter. When these eggs hatch, they are transported. The parent will actually transport the little tadpoles into a reservoir, so often in a bromeliad or things like that. So they often will move them to an area with a bit of water. The mother then return periodically to lay unfertilized eggs, which the tadpoles will feed on, and then they become until they're ready to metamorphise and leave the water. So the larvae are obligate egg feeders and will starve without this form of nutrition, so the mother just keeps making eggs. Adults feed on ants and mites on the ground after sunrise, but no later than 1600, so I believe that'd be like 4 o'clock. And when they find refuge in the ground at the leaf litter or 4 logs, whatever. So this actually behaviour makes them among the rarest to breed in captivity, the most difficult breeding frogs, or the poison dart frogs to breed in captivity. As a result, they're not widely found in the pet market, but they can be legally smuggled rather than legally or properly bred domestic ones. So wild caught frogs often stress, high mortality rate. This happens with all sorts of species that get a wild caught. So if you try to want to get, for 99% of people, just get an animal that's captive bred because it'll be much easier for you. If you want to try and establish a new species within a hobby or something like that, you can consider it if you're experienced. But most of the time, 9 times out of 10, do not get a wild caught. Yeah, really, really cool. There's a few available in the pet trade that are, if you really want the species, there are some that are captive bred that people have managed to breed them, but they're highly sought after. So you're going to have a little bit of competition. So, like other poison dart frogs, they produce cordotoxin and histotoxins. So these are moderate to highly toxic compounds that are potent, non-competitive agents with nitroacetylide receptors. So, which is pretty interesting. So they have some affinity with like sodium and potassium channels, but they're much less potent than their targets. And the synthesis of these is actually been hard to synthesize like organically, but they've been subject to many different attempts of it. And sadly, this is a species that is considered critically endangered, which is a little bit sad, obviously because of deforestation and things like that, especially in Western Colombia. But yeah, it's a little bit of a sad story. But yeah, there's quite a few different species of these guys. Are really, really cool. An Uphagia. So yeah, there's other species pictures of them. It looks like there's a lot of variation within the species. And next up, we've got the Splashback Poison Dart Frog, another really cool one. So this is Antipobates glatinotis. Let's have a look at this guy. Oh, he's perfect one right here. Look at the little guy. Look at the little goober. So these are a species of poison dart frog, least concern this time. They are endemic to the rainforests of the southern Amazon basin of Brazil, where their natural habitats typically tropical, moist lowland forests. So the eggs are typically laid on the ground, but then the tadpoles are moved to temporary pools. And though it remains widespread and locally common, they are subject to, as I mentioned, habitat loss through some of the other species, and have already disappeared due to deforestation and flooding caused by dams, which is a little bit sad. And these species are relatively common in captivity and regularly bred, but the wild populations are still sometimes at risk for illegal collections, so that's another big issue for these guys. Also, chytrid fungus, another big thing as well. So the best known variants, so most poison dart frogs come in all sorts of different colours, even within the species. The most common variants are like a black belly or yellow, orange, or red above, but this colour is very kind of variable, so there's lots of different variations within the species, and some can have a whitish mint or light blue underparts, some are mottled, and some are considered almost whitish, which is known by moonshine among people that keep them in captivity. And actually, it's been speculated that some morphs were actually separate species, but genetic testing actually shows that there's basically no difference genetically between them. They're just different coloured morphs, which is really, really interesting. So there's so many different colours. People think, oh, they must be different species, but the genetics show they're actually very closely related. They are the same species, while within species variation, it's just they're very, very colourful. It's kind of the thing with dart frogs, which is really cool. And they do not actually follow a clear geographic pattern. So some animals that have lots of colours will have like a geographic pattern. So like some areas will have more of this colour and more of that colour. So it seems to be something that's pretty random within the species. There's no clear pattern, which is interesting. So that means, you could find any of these variations pretty much mostly all over the place, which is cool. And they're actually relatively large for a dart frog. So they get to about 42 millimeters or about 1.7 inches long from snout to vent. As I mentioned, it's the same way you measure other frogs. And up to, really, really cool. As I mentioned also, least concern, so doing quite well. But I mentioned deforestation, things like that. Also, chytrid fungus is a big thing for frogs all around, like South America and New Zealand as well. Chytrid fungus is a big issue for our native frogs, Australian frogs as well. So there's some big issues there. But yeah, we're going to be moving on to the next guy. So those two were both done by Leaf and Scott. Did a wonderful job. Leaf and Nicholas has done this one. So we're going to have a look at the... this is said Hercules beetle, but this is actually the Japanese rhinoceros beetle. So let's have a look at these guys. Some little cutie right here, looking in the light. These are the males. I think they all got the males, but there's sexual dimorphism. So Alomina dictorata, which is the Japanese rhinoceros beetle, is pretty cool. So there's a few different subspecies. They don't live just on Japan. They live in Korea, in Taiwan and Thailand and Okinawa places. So they live a little bit more general than just Japan, but they do have quite a big range. So really interesting species as well. So they also show quite a striking sexual dimorphism. So these are all males, you can see here. The male's got this really, really big horn here, so that's where they get the name rhinoceros beetle. But they're also much larger. So typically males will reach about 40 to 80 millimeters in length, while females reach from 40 to 60, so there's at least a 20 millimeter difference. And the long, it's called cephalic horn of the species characteristic, and it goes to that yellow. And they use it to joust with each other for mates. And by means of their forked horn, they can actually lift other males off the ground and throw them in the air. So it's a great way for them to fight. And also they have the smaller thoracic horn here that is also forked. So it's another way to tell them apart. And their eyes can be white or red, which means they're quite well adapted for seeing in low light conditions because they are nocturnal. And their body, you can see, is usually dark brown with the ventral part being black. And they're not too different from other species in that other regards than other rhinoceros beetles. And they are strong flyers. They're strong flyers, but never cover large distances with flying. They typically like to do their own thing. But yeah, really, really cool. They love a rhinoceros beetle. So as I mentioned, they are present in Japan, but they can also be found on Taiwan, the Korean Peninsula, and eastern China, where they're typically like broadleaf forests in both tropical and subtropical areas. And although there's populations and regions, male beetles can actually vary greatly in size and horn performance, since there may have been relative intensities. So some areas may be less sensitive to pressure than others. So it's very interesting in that regard. So in terms of their life cycle and behavior, most of their life they actually spend underground in their larval and pupal stages. So they actually only spend 4 months as an adult beetle. So the earliest beetles typically emerge late in the spring and usually die about mid-September, early October. And their preferred foods are tree saps, fruit, or pretty much anything sugary. And male beetles normally die during the fall after mating many times, while the female will actually normally die shortly after laying her eggs as reproduction shortens their lifespan. So fighting occurs among males competing for males or territory, and these eggs are laid directly in the ground, and usually after a year, they will hatch into larvae that usually mature after a year. And during this larval stage, they're actually quite well adapted for. They have able to digest enzymes in wood, such as cellulose, glycanose, and those kind of things. So they're able to really destroy a lot of plants. So they're pretty much well adapted for eating wood. And this has actually been harnessed by industries to biotransform the water substrate for waste substrate for mushroom production, which is quite interesting. And there's been a lot of research looking into these enzymes to be used as like industrials, which is quite interesting used in industry. So in terms of culture as well, they're actually quite common in Japanese culture. So they've been seen in advertisements on Godzilla. There's a Pokemon Heracross, which is based on the species, the Japanese Rhinoceros beetle, and some other things as well. And you can buy them breed them. A lot of people buy them and breed them as well, especially children. They go like $5 or $10 and they can be sold as pets. And also they have been used for gambling. So like Siamese fighting fish or cricket fights, people will kind of place bets on which one will win. Make a gambling thing, which is pretty interesting. Probably not the best, but still really, really cool. Let's have a look at these little guys, little goobers. I love these little goobers. So yeah, that's the Japanese Rhinoceros beetle. So this one's done by Leaf and Nicholas Linerider. I do think that Leaf needs to update the things. It's just based on the Hercules beetle, but that's okay. Mod works well otherwise. So next up, we're having a look at our last of our exhibit animals. We have got the Chinese firebelly newt. So let's have a look. There's a little one sitting on the bottom lane. Let's have a look at the one swimming. Look at this little guy. We'll have a look at you swimming. Follow you. What a cutie. So this is Cynops orlentus. So this is a type of firebelly newt in the genus. So there's like the Japanese one and those ones. So they're quite common in the pet trade. And they're considered least concern, and they're found in China. So they're a small newt, so it's about 6 to 10 centimeters, or about 2 to 4 inches, that range from dark brown to black and above, with an orange scarlet belly. But some can be like a little bit lighter. They can have like an ash white coloration, but mostly they have a reddish underbelly and a dark top, which is interesting as well. And its skin is relatively smooth, and they have parietal glands. Typically, males are a little bit thinner than overall than females, so they'd be more squarish. And sexual dimorphism is also seen in the tail, with males having shorter tails and higher fins. And like most newts, they have a swollen cloacal region during the breeding season. So as I mentioned, some individuals will be light in colour and things like that, and they're very often confused with other species such as the Japanese firebelly newt, but the way to tell them apart is like a smaller size, smooth skin, rounded tail, things like that. Those are ways to tell them apart from the Japanese one. And also these bright ventral colours, typically, as I mentioned, they can be different colours. They can be faint orange, red, or brown, but typically it still keeps the same pattern. It's just a little bit of variation within them. In terms of natural habitat, as mentioned, they can be found in China. So a lot of Chinese provinces like Jiangsu, Xiaolong, Hubei, and so many places like that. They typically like to live in bodies of water at various altitudes, like mountain ponds, small brooks, flooded fields, and cold still ponds, and things like that. So anywhere where water is cold and quiet with shade and a mud-free bottom with rocks and things like that, they typically like to hang out in, which is pretty interesting. And they frequently will swim up to the surface and darting back and forth actively. And this clear hints to how they're typically housed in captivity. So, as I mentioned, they're quite a common pet. They're typically like a cool planted aquarium in captivity with a small land area. The dense aquatic vegetation and mats of floating plants are very much appreciated. They're typically temperatures above 23 should be avoided. So typically about 14 to 20 degrees, about 58 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit is good for them. And we don't know exactly how terrestrial they are in the wild, but it should pretty much be considered a thing that all of them in captivity should get some sort of land area just to get out if they want. And that can be stress as well. Be really interesting. In terms of feeding, these guys, there's actually not very much known about how they feed on in their natural habitat, but based on what's has been fed in captivity, they feed a lot on like invertebrates and larvae and eggs and small things like that, where they will either actively hunt or ambush prey, and they'll eat like earthworms in captivity, waxworms, glass shrimps, bloodworms, things like that. So that's probably pretty similar or equivalent to what they'd be eating in the wild. And in terms of breeding, they've actually been uncommonly bred in captivity, but they are, which when one considered probably the most common species of newt. And it's illegal to import them in New Zealand, where we have them, so pretty much all of them are captive bred. And courtship behavior typically consists of a male actively following the female, tail fanning. We'll have a look at another one. We'll have a look at you there, why not? Sitting on land, little cutie. So the male follows the female, tail fanning and sometimes biting. The eggs are typically laid singly on aquatic vegetation, or where possible, the females will fold the leaves of aquatic plants over the eggs to conceal it, in a manner similar to other species of newts. And a lot of people, true hibernation is not necessary to introduce breeding, but they do prefer cooler temperatures to help make it a little bit cooler, just to promote the kind of they be like, okay, we need to breed now. So that's what happens. A lot of species is a lot of determined by temperature. So if you drop that temperature, they'll just be like, okay, now we've done that time to breed. And natural observations suggest that these guys breed around March to July when water temperatures are between 15 to 23 degrees, about 59 to 73 degrees Fahrenheit. And the females are found to lay between 10 and 236 eggs in a single season, where they average about 96 eggs per female and an average about 2.8 eggs produced per day, with an average hatching rate of about 74%. And the larvae, eggs, and metamorphs of the species are easy to care for, using methods found for other guys. They typically take 1 to 3 years to reach sexual maturity, and some prefer to keep the metamorphs in very shallow water, lots of aquatic plants and things like that to spur up their rates, but that's kind of husbandry, one of those things. It's some people works for some people, works for others, but yeah, really, really cool. So really awesome little mod. Let's have a look at this little guy. I love this little guy here sitting on there. Really awesome mod. I do love some newts. So we're moving on to some exhibit animals. So that one was done just by Leaf. Leaf always does a good job with this stuff. So next up we got one by Great Cake Mods. We have got the Tanzanian red-billed hornbill. So this is Turquoise Rahai. This is the one that you see on Lion King. This is Zazu. Pretty interesting. So they're a type of hornbill, not too different from other species, especially in the genus of like African red-billed hornbills. So very much like monogamous, like to nest in trees, are omnivorous. They eat a lot of fruits and things and small animals. So pretty generous in that regard. Uh, Not really too much to say that's not distinguished about red-billed hornbills, which is true. So this is a Tanzanian one. So they are a small group. So they typically during incubation, the female lays 3 to 6 eggs in a nest hollow, and as I mentioned, um, they are omnivorous, so they'll feed on insects and fruits and seeds and even small rodents. And what happens is that they'll lay 3 to 6 white eggs, and then when they're nesting, they actually protect her young. They'll build a wall around the opening of her nest. So basically, she locks herself in, and then she'll basically tend to them. And then the male, there's only just a hole big enough for the male to feed her. So it's very similar to other species of hornbills. And when the chicks get too big for the nest, the mother will break out and then rebuild the wall, and then let the chicks inside for continued protection against predators. And then both parents would continue to feed the chicks as well. Any of these quite interesting. So in terms of the Tanzanian red hornbill, so they're quite small hornbills, and you can see they've got that curved beak with that small dot in orange. They can vary colour their sclera as well. And they have a small cast. They don't have big casts like those great hornbills, but you can kind of see a little bit one there. Also have grayish white bellies. And these guys are typically found in central Tanzania, and usually found nesting in trees or in forest savannas where foods are plentiful. So not too different from other species of hornbill. As I mentioned, ecology is very similar. Yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see Zazu in Planet Zoo. Another nice little one. So you can see this one's a male. The female's a little bit more drab. Look at these guys. Really, really cool. Definitely a big fan. Came out wonderfully. Great one by Great Cake Mods. So we've got another one by Great Cake Mods as well. We have got the Sable. So really, really cool. This is the Tulpix sable, but we're just going to talk about sable species. So sables are a species of marten. So they're a small omnivorous kind of mammal found in the forest areas of Russia, from Ural Mountains to Siberia and northern Mongolia. But they also can be found borders in Kazakhstan, China, North Korea, and Japan. It's quite interesting. So the word sable actually originates from Slavic languages as they entered Western European languages through the medieval fur trade. And sables, as mentioned, small omnivorous. They live in dense forests, and they were known for their luxurious fur, which ranges from light to dark brown. It's just actually softer and silkier than American martens. So that's kind of where they got started the fur trade, which is quite interesting. So in terms of description, typically males will reach about 38 to 56 centimeters, or about 15 to 22 inches in body length, with a tail measuring 9 to 12 centimeters, or 3.5 to 4.7 inches, and they weigh about 880 to just under 2 kilograms, or so about 88 0.88 kilograms to 2 kilograms, pretty much, or about 1.9 to 3.9 pounds. But females being a little bit smaller, so about 35 to 51 centimeters, 40 to 20 inches, with a tail length of about 7 to 12, 11 centimeters, a little bit smaller. And the winter coat is typically longer and more luxurious than the summer coat, so that's when they probably preferred to be hunted. But there are different quote unquote subspecies. I do think they're probably oversplit like a lot of animals, just based on coat colors, things like that. I think there could be there's some debates on the taxonomy. Some suggest up to 30 subspecies. Most of them agree on 17, but I highly doubt that. I think it might just be more variation within coats because that's what a lot of those were based on, and that doesn't really tell you much about relatedness. So it's very likely there's probably no more than a couple subspecies, if any, for the sable. But different coats, yeah, that's one way to tell them apart. So there's some variation, like Japanese sables typically are marked with black on their legs, and individuals actually have a light patch on their fur that may be grey wallow. There's just a lot of variation in there. And as I mentioned, their fur is soft and silkier than other martens, and they generally resemble pine martens in appearance, but have more elongated heads and shorter tails, and probably shorter tails and longer ears, which is quite interesting as well. So in terms of their habitats, they typically inhabit dense forests, so preferred spruce forests, pine forests, cedars, and birch forests in both lowland and mountainous terrain. They defend home territories that could be anywhere from 4 to 30 square kilometers, or about 1.5 to 11 square miles in size, but it depends on terrain and availability, things like that. So do we actually have babies in here? Should have some babies. So I might have actually left them out. I think I may have did, or did I not? Let me check. Yeah, I might actually, yeah. No, I actually do have some babies in here, I think. Did I not? Let me check quickly. No, it should be good. Oh, yeah, we do have babies. Yep, yep, yep. So we'll put those in here while we talk about them. There should be some cubs in there too. Or have they grown up? Yeah, no, we got them. Now we got them. Okay, forgive that tangent. We'll be alright. So sables typically live in, as well, burrows near riverbanks in the thickest part of woods. These burrows are commonly made to be more secure, being dug among tree roots, and they've been known to wander about 6 to 12 kilometers a day for food. They are good climbers of cliffs and trees, so they're good at climbing. They're also typically more secure, being dug around, roots and things like that. They're also quite good climbers, as I mentioned, probably crepuscular, but they're more active during the day during the mating season. The dens are typically well hidden by grass and things like that, but maybe temporary, especially as winter the animal travels more to search for prey. They are omnivorous, so typically their diet varies seasonally, and in the summer they eat large numbers of mountain hare and other small mammals, but in the winter, when they're confined to retreats of snow and frost, they feed on wild berries, rodents, hares, even small musk deer. They'll also hunt ermines, small weasels, and birds. Sometimes they'll also follow wolves and bears to scavenge off their kills. They'll also eat gastropods, such as slugs, as they rub on the ground to remove the mucus, and also occasionally eat fish with their paws, which is quite interesting. Just want to check as well. Have we got babies in here? Should see some babies in here. Yeah, there's. They've all grown up. No, here's the babies. So that's the baby one. They're really cute. Here's the adults here. Here's the adults. You can see the adults a little bit more. But, okay, just wanted to make sure. Here's the babies. We'll have a look at them because we're just about to talk about breeding. So typically they hunt by smell and scent and sound, but as they have quite a good sense of hearing, and they mark their territory using glands on their abdomen, and they are prey for a bunch of large carnivores such as wolves, foxes, lynxes, wolves, tigers, lynxes, eagles, and large owls. There's no ligers in the wild. It's a silly question. But yeah, we're going to have a look at the cute little babies. So typically, mating generally occurs between June and August 15th, though it dates vary geography, because they have such a wide range. When courting, they'll run and jump and rumble like cats, and they dig meter-long shallow grooves in the snow to kind of accompany the slow that the males will dig them. And males will also fight vigorously for the females. They'll enter estrus in spring, and their mating can as long as last as 8 hours. And then after insemination, actually they can do what's called delayed implantation. So they mate, but they won't implant a baby until about 8 months later. Although gestation lasts typically about 245 to 298 days, the embryonic development only requires 25 to 30 days. So they will be pregnant for a while, but they hold off until the offspring, to the best time to actually gestate and be able to make the baby. So litters will typically number about 1 to 7, but litters are 2 to 3 are the most common, and males assist females in defending their territories and providing food for the babies. So also, they're born with their eyes closed and skin covered with very thin layer of hair, with newborn cubs being born about 25 to 35 grams, or about 0.88 to 1.23 ounces on average, and get about 10 to 12 centimeters long, or about 3.9 to 4.7 inches. They typically open their eyes at about 30 days old. 36 days, leave the nest shortly afterwards. 7 weeks, they are weaned and given regurgitated food. Then once they've done that, they reach sexual maturity up to 2 years, and they've been reported up to 20 years in fur farms and up to 18 in the wild. They've also been known to interbreed with pine martens, and in some areas where they overlap, and plus people breeding them in fur farms, they've seemed to create a hybrid called the Cutis, which is slightly smaller than a pure sable with coarser fur, but similar markings, and they're typically sterile, although there's been one instance of a female Cutis breeding with a male pine marten, so yeah, it's one of those things, another hybrid. Pretty interesting. So in terms of their distribution in Russia, they were actually largely... the sable's distribution is largely a result of mass reintroductions, which evolved 19,000 animals between 1940 and 1965. So their range extends northward to the tree line and up to Siberia, Western Asia, and they're quite a wide range. In Mongolia, they live across the Atoli Mountains and some places of the Korea Peninsula, so they have quite a wide range. And because of the variability, as I mentioned, there's about 3 to 17 subspecies described. 7 to 30 subspecies, but typically is about 17 is the average. But I doubt most of them are just geographic variation, and they're probably just colors. But yeah, in terms of human history, they were highly valued for their fur since the early Middle Ages because it was considered most beautiful and richly tinted pelts of all martens, and because it was quite soft and all that. And it was held in great esteem. Even Henry I was presented with the black sable one. It was about no less than 100 pounds, which was quite a lot at the time. And that caused a little bit of their decline, especially in a lot of areas, and it's part of fur farms as well. And that caused some declines, but luckily there's been reintroductions, things like that, and that's why they are considered least concerned. So another really, really cool one. So now we are going to have a look at these little guys. So this is the Sumatran tiger. So the Tubuk sable and Tanzanian red-billed hornbill is done by Great Cake Mods. The Sumatran tiger is done by Havoc, 119, and Good Boy. So this has been a remake of this guy, a really, really awesome. So we're going to have a little bit of talk about these guys. So the Sumatran tiger. So these are a population, or consider their own subspecies, of kind of island tiger that are found in the island of Sumatra, and the only surviving population of tigers from Sumatra, as the Bali and Javan tigers are extinct. So there's kind of 2 taxonomies that have been a thing recently. So there is kind of the taxonomy of the 2 subspecies, so like the mainland and the island tigers. So that includes the Sumatra and Bali Javan, and the mainland ones, of course, is like the South Chinese, Bengal, Siberian, things like that. But there's a measure that 8 different subspecies typically, or 7, I think. Yes. No. Yeah, 7. But yeah, anyway, so there's been some research into this population. It seems like these tigers, looking at the DNA, this tiger population became isolated at the end of the Pleistocene Holocene, so about 12,000 to 6,000 years ago, where they became isolated from living other populations of living tigers and kind of shrunk and went through island evolution to get a little bit smaller just to better survive on these islands. And there's also genetic evidence suggests as well that they're quite unique in terms of genetics, and there's not much gene flow between Sumatran tigers and mainland tigers, so there seems to be very much cut off. They weren't able to cross between Malaysia and Sumatra, so they typically are quite isolated genetically, which is quite interesting. So Javan tiger is a little bit of island tiger. They are quite interesting. They look definitely quite a bit different than your typical tiger. So they are darker in fur color and have broader stripes than Javan tigers, and the stripes tend to evolve into spots near the end of the back, as you kind of see going on here. And there's lines of small dark spots on their flank as well, and which is a really cool thing that Sumatran tigers have. They have a really prominent ruff, as you can see going on here. You can see the Sumatra tigers. I've had the privilege of working with Sumatran tigers for a couple of days, and there was one named Scout. I've just fallen in love with him. He was a big male Sumatran, and yeah, very much look like that. You can very see that prominent ruff. And they're actually still one of these smaller tiger subspecies, or tiger populations, depending on who you ask. They are bigger than like the Bali and Javan, but not smaller, of course, mainland ones. So they went through a little bit of island dwarfism, so got smaller to survive on less resources. So typically, males will measure between 2.2 to 2.5 meters, or about 7 to 8 feet long, and head to body length, and typically weigh between the skull length about 295 to 355 centimeters, or about 11 to 13 inches, and weigh between 100 to 140 kilograms, or 220 to 310 pounds. So that's like the size of a really big person, compared to the like 200 plus kilos of more mainland tigers, even sometimes 300 plus. But typically females much smaller, between 75 and 110, about 165 to 234 pounds, and measure between 250 and 2.3 meters, or about 7 foot 1 to 7 foot 7, and have a skull length of about 10 to 11 inches, or about 263 to 204 millimeters, which is quite interesting. So have a look at the female, as she kind of sleeps over there. Definitely a cutie. So Sumatran tigers sadly live in a quite fragmented populations. They live from sea level up to coastal populations, so they used to be much more common. They tend to prefer lowland forests and things like that, and they actually use non-forest habitats and human-dominated landscapes on the fringe of protected areas to a lesser degree. But typically, they are now restricted to protected areas of forest, which is because people like to attack them. But in 1978, the populations were estimated to be about 1,000 individuals based on surveys, but that has gone down. The most recent population estimates, as I mentioned, go down because of hunting and people poaching, things like that. Today, the population is considered to be between 680 and 290 tigers, so around 300, 400 tigers, which is very sad because that's what has actually made them considered critically endangered, a critically endangered population. But like, there's lots of zoos trying to help them. So they tend to prefer uncultivated forests. So they make little use of plantations with acacia and oil palms. They prefer natural forests and use areas of higher elevation with lower annual rainfall, farther from forest edges and closer to forest centres. So they prefer forests with dense understories to allow them to hide, and they strongly avoid forest areas with high human influences. They tend to like leaf litter, things like that. Tiger oil and tiger records and oil palm plantations and things like that are scarce. They prefer those habitats to be able to hide and things like that. And they're greatly impacted by things like encroachment of logging for the plantations, and also chopping down. Also, they talk about the threats as well. So there seem to have been, luckily in some areas, increasing tiger density. So there's some conservation work helping them. And there's been research looking to do what type of species they eat. Typically, 9 species that were larger than a kilo they'd eat is like great argus, macaques, porcupines, tapirs, mouse deers, sambar deer, muntjac, and pigs. So they do have quite an interesting variety of food that they eat. So typically the main threats to these guys is prey depletion, so not enough food for them to eat. Let's look at the baby. Where's the baby? As we talk about the threats, we'll talk about their hopes. So, as I mentioned, palm oil plantations attack mainly because of palm oil and things like that. Habitat loss, prey-based depletion, so people are like hunting for bushmeat, which means less food going into tigers' mouths, but also illegal trade, primarily for the domestic market. So they need large forests to thrive, and about 70% of the areas of where they used to live, there's only about 20% remain forest, which is sad. Even the largest populations are threatened by deforestation in the outer regions, so they become isolated. And the impact of climate change is also something as well. That means tigers are moving more northward, and since often they're stuck in these parks, they will have to run into people to move into more ideal areas of habitat, so that can cause more conflict with people. During 1997, it was estimated about 53 tigers were killed by poachers who want them, of course, and farmers also killing them to get rid of, help to protect their livestock. But a lot of people are selling tiger parts, because of the illegal trade, traditional medicine. And they were selling for like $116 a kilo in US dollars. But luckily, that's efforts, and also lots of efforts to protect them. So luckily, in terms of conservation work, they are a species or a subspecies that a lot of people working with them trying to protect them. Highly prohibited. There's lots of research trying to help them adjust to climate change and adjust to people. A lot of community-based programs as well. About 210 million has been invested in tiger law enforcement with forest patrols and things like that to help populations go up. And generally, tiger populations have actually gone up the past few years. It's the highest they've ever been in a little while. So it's a really great conservation story, helping protecting them and reintroducing them and things like that, helping to help tigers and people live together, which is cool. And in captivity, there's about 375 captive Sumatran tigers listed in management plans. So there's lots of them in captivity with about 14 zoos, 50 of them housed in 14 zoos across Australia and New Zealand. So Australia and New Zealand, most tigers in our zoos are Sumatran tigers, which help obviously their population more. We don't have that many Bengals and things like that anymore. We tend to use Sumatran because they're the ones with the most conservation value that we can have readily. So I imagine there's some zoos with Malayan tigers, but Sumatrans are mostly the ones managed by Australia and New Zealand. But there's some, of course, across the world. And all of them are from 15 founders and offspring of the 15 founders. But like some of these things have been caused by inbreeding, but it's trying to help the population make sure they can recover from that. But yeah, really, really cool. So it's really cool to see these guys. And another wonderful remaster by Good Boy. Good Boy just knocks it out of the park with anything to do with mammals. It's just incredible what he can do. And I just love this new remake. I love seeing Sumatran tigers. As I mentioned, I've worked with them for a couple of days, so that just helped me find a new love for these tigers. Like, I've already loved these Sumatran tigers. I love the conservation work going to help them, but that just like heightened it for me, being able to work with them and be in the presence of them. It's just such cool animals. Definitely a big fan. And we'll have a look about the cute little baby while we sort that out. So let's have a look at you, little cutie. Little cutie, definitely a little cub. And I love this little cub. And luckily, a lot of zoos in New Zealand, like just Hamilton Zoo, the tiger I was talking about, Scout, is now a dad and he has cubs. So very, very awesome that we got that. So anyway, tangent aside, got to thank everyone for your lovely mods. So thank obviously Leaf and Scott and Nick and Great Cake Mods and Good Boy and all that. So you've all done wonderful jobs. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of loading thing. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.